Hello again. Let's take a deeper view at these side triads on the tree of life, starting off with the watery emotional ones. Now, Yetzirah, this world here, is completely the world of water. So it's the world of forms. It makes sort of fluid forms. But when they touch the physical world, they become physical aspects of us. So that's a way of describing how our thoughts and emotions can lead to physical health or disease. They come in the watery area of our mind, and then perhaps they get stagnant or they flow on. And living waters, which are described in the Bible, Miriam was the person who brought water to the people in the desert during the Exodus. And of course, the New Testament talks about living waters. Living waters are the spirit, the air world, coming down into Yetzirah. And the fires of grace come from Absolute, which is the fiery world. We've got fire, air, water, earth in the four worlds. You can see them in the levels of the tree as well, but in the Toledano tradition, we prefer to use the ladder because it's a little bit easier. I do realize that still looking at these diagrams can be a bit sort of, as in they are complex. They're sort of like blood and water to me. So hopefully I don't overstretch you by missing points that are vital here. Anyway, we're talking about these triads here and here. And as we spoke about them the other day, this one on the left is basically pain, and this one on the right is basically pleasure. And life is about pain and pleasure. There's always going to be pain. If you love, you're going to lose. Every single marriage ends, whether it's with death or a leaving or a divorce. So there is always going to be loss, and there is always going to be gain. And the left-hand side of the tree is all about constriction. It's about the loss aspect. It's about discipline. It's about no, and it's about endings. And this side of the tree is about beginnings and expansion and joy and delight. So obviously this side of the tree is far more important and far more popular than the other side. But without the balance in the two, we get lost. The central column is consciousness. And even down at Yesod, there is a form of consciousness. The body will communicate through Yesod how it's feeling to us. Whether we listen to that is another matter. And we can communicate with the body from Tiferet and down at Yesod. Yesod, of course, is the automatic communication backwards and forwards about appetites and feelings, because the feeling triad here is the one that some stuff from Yesod will come up to Tiferet through. So it will give us a brief feeling. Feelings pass. Feelings are like having a great email that really makes you feel very happy, but then half an hour later you get an email that isn't so good, so you go back to the normal state or you go down again. Whereas in the side triads, these are emotions. These are far deeper, and sometimes we don't even know that we've got them because they've been sort of carved into us very, very young. Now, what we store in this triad is pain. And we don't have to store it. There's a difference in my terminology, it's not everybody's terminology, between pain and suffering. Deepak Chopra once really inspired me by saying, I'm not asking you to give up your pain, I am asking you to give up your suffering. And when we suffer, it's when we hold to a pain. It's when we think it's more real than it is. Now, obviously, pain is real, but when we hold on to it and hold on to memories of it, and we find reasons to keep it, that's when it'll come into suffering. And frankly, suffering comes from any contradiction to Yesod's belief as to how things should be. Yesod believes that it's right, and it will compare and oppose. That's the way it's wired to be. So if we don't think the world's the way our ego thinks it should be, then we're going to feel upset about it. Now, we may be briefly upset here, but if we keep thinking about it and going over it and over it, and the world is very Hoddian now, we criticize the news, but we still watch or listen to the news, even if only to criticize it and make it wrong. And Hod is very good at that. Hod in the Ten Commandments is the place of thou shalt not steal. And that includes stealing reputation and stealing time from ourselves and stealing joy from ourselves and stealing things that we really don't want. And perhaps also the opposite of that is the trickery that's also in Hod. It's very mercurial, and we can trick ourselves that we're not stealing our time, that it's interesting, that we're doing research, but the end result is going to be reflected in here. A healthy side triad here will warn us. It will say, you don't want to go down that alley. You don't want to go further down there. And it will say, is it a good idea to watch all this destructive, vampirish, nasty, killing, all these movies and all these TV shows that we watch as a matter of course now because we're so wired into them. And yet they put more and more destructive energy in this side. This triad, for example, is the triad of fibromyalgia. Now, fibromyalgia, if you read books like John Sarno's The Divided Mind and Gabor Mate's wonderful books, you will find that fibromyalgia is a trauma response. It's real. Oh, yes, it's real. The pain and the fatigue within it are real, but they're stored in here. And they are basically scabs on trauma. The whole body reacts to the continual feeling that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I can't sort this, I am wrong, I am guilty, I am shameful. And when that gets really, really deep and we haven't been able to balance it with self-love, then it will blend down through here into the physical world and it becomes a real physical problem. I have a friend called John Wadlow who does amazing things with people with fibromyalgia by getting them into this triad and letting the stuff in. I also have meditations on my website, Triads Sapphires, which take you into all 4 side triads. If you want to do those, you will have to buy them. They're only about $5 each. But always remember that you can clear this stuff simply through repeated contemplation or meditation and connection with the divine. The divine can come straight down and clear these areas out in our psyches. It will do that in times of huge crisis. A crisis like a death or a challenge or the loss of a job can really wake us up. And if we open up, then grace can come down and do a large amount of clearing. Now, the other side here, the addiction side, this is the pleasure side. Addiction is when it gets too much. It's when we have to have the chocolate or we have to have the alcohol or we have to get back on Facebook. We don't realize that we are being driven by these impulses, which aren't really us. They're there to give us a brief escape from the pain on this side. And we will blend these 2 sides together. And if Tiferet isn't strong to say, hang on a minute, am I doing this right? Is this what I want to do? Tiferet is the watcher. It's the part of us that gives that very gentle little, do you think that's a really good idea? And we'll go, yeah, I think it's a great idea, and have another mince pie. And I'm just as guilty of that as anybody else. But at least I do know in consciousness to watch for it. And at least I do know how important it is to spend 20 minutes in the morning before I start work in contemplation, in meditation, raising my energy up at least to Da'at and hopefully for a few moments up to Keta. Because if you do that, the grace comes through, your guardians, your guides are able to speak to you much more clearly, and you'll become more aware of what you're doing. Basically, when we live in Yesod, which most of us do most of the time, because Keta's tiring, let's face it, you go to a great workshop, you come home absolutely knackered. It may have been inspirational, but it's also tiring because you've been awake for that whole time. Yesod is basically asleep. It works on automatic. So we have a situation in the physical world. Yesod makes a decision about it. Is that good or bad? Do I like it or do I not? And then Yesod goes to Hod for more information about it to continue its belief that it's good or bad. And Hod will find on the internet or in books what it wants to maintain that belief, because Yesod wants to have the belief and to be right about things. This is what my tribe thinks. Sometimes we have to change tribes, and then we'll usually go into another tribe and think what is right is what that tribe thinks. So we'll think about it, then we may act on it. And that means going out and talking to other people or doing something about it. In a good way, we may find we need a little more exercise, and NetSat will go out and do it. Whereas if we find something negative, NetSat will go out and promote that. In a good way, HOD will give us the impetus perhaps to decide we're going to go on a march for freedom, and NetSat will go on that march for freedom. But generally in the modern world, we're still very stuck in HOD. We'll go round and round and round and round, because if we work the tree correctly, we come down it rather than going up it. You'll find more about that on all my courses and on Tree of Sapphires. And also, don't forget, I do have the Mystery School every Tuesday evening, 8 p.m. UK time. That is entirely free. And if you want to join it, go to Tree of Sapphires /mystery-school and find out more about it, because we discuss this kind of thing. Kabbalah's meant to be discussed in groups. But this side, which is the very much more tempting side, will play along with this side if Tiferet isn't open to spirit, if Tiferet is always being fed by Yesod, because we'll go, I need my fix. And that's what this side can be. When it's healthy, it's loving kindness and mercy and action and true justice. When it's unhealthy, it's the quick fix. It's the ordering the takeaway from Deliveroo. It's binge watching. It's not actually getting into the solution. It's covering it up. Now, how do we deal with this? Well, firstly, having the knowledge that it exists is really useful. And we also have to look at these triads, which I'm going to look at in another video. But simple techniques such as emotional freedom therapy, EFT, are incredibly useful here, because they open up the neural pathways in the brain, they open up the acupuncture, the meridians in the body, and they will start to help you see the light a little more. I use EFT for absolutely everything. If I just feel bad about something, I'll go, even though I'm feeling rubbish about this, I love and accept myself. Even though I'm feeling rubbish about this, I love and accept myself. Even though I'm feeling rubbish about this, I truly love and accept myself. And then I'll go round the spots in the brain with the negative affirmation and feel it starting to clear. Sometimes it'll take a while to clear, but sometimes it takes literally about 6 or 7 taps. And then I'm open to the ferret that says, nah, it's all right, really. Or what a good idea this would be. My favorite EFT teacher on YouTube is Brad Yates, but you can find your own. And another thing to use is Ho'oponopono. You can find a very good book by Joe Vitale called Zero Limits, which introduces you to that. But there's also plenty on YouTube. And Ho'oponopono is 4 phrases. It's an Hawaiian teaching technique, which has 4 phrases. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. Now, I prefer to use them as in thank you, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, because I'm saying Ho'opono to the Holy One. But when you start off with it, it's quite useful to say it to you rather than to the Holy One, because you may have, as many people I've worked with have, a deep resistance to asking God for forgiveness and saying you're sorry, because you've been taught that you're a miserable worm, usually within Christianity, and you've kind of had enough of that. You need to rebel out of it, which is fine. But if you say those words to yourself, you start recreating neural pathways in the brain, which are very slightly different. And Yesod, God bless it, really doesn't know there's anybody on the planet except you. Everything else is outside of it. It believes in separation, whereas Tiferet believes in unity, and Keter believes that we are all one in God, or all one in Christ, depending on your religion. And Yesod will not know who hurt you. I often say to people, it's absolutely true, my ex left me once. I made him leave me 1,000 times because I went over it and 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 over it, and went into all the emotions that you're very naturally going to go into when a marriage breaks up. But when you keep holding to it, then it's going to get deeper and deeper, and in the end it'll go into that side triad, and it will become a psychological problem, and it will develop more problems. But it's you that's done it to you. The situation happened to you, it's how you deal with it. So to repeat, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, actually starts to reprogram Yesod and all these triads, because it doesn't know who hurt you. So it doesn't need to know who's healing you. They don't need to be forgiven. You need to forgive yourself for holding on to the pain. The healing for this side is forgiveness. It's letting go. To forgive is not to condone, it's to give up the pain that went before. And the healing for this side is discipline. To say, hang on, do I want this? Can I set myself a goal to take better care of myself? So ironically, the healing for this side comes from Hesed, which is loving kindness, forgiveness, and mercy. And the healing for this side comes from Gevura, which is discernment and discipline. And actually, that's not ironic at all. It's about the pure balance that brings you back to the central column on the Tree of Life. Thank you for listening. We'll do another one on the intellectual side triads soon.